Statistically, there probably are lies in this presentation, so be ready for that. My name's James, I do security stuff, and I get irrationally angry about the misuse of numbers. So, you've probably heard this one, 70% of cyber attacks target small businesses. It's been going around for years. You know, it's a well-known one. Marketers love it. You've got people who will offer their products to solve this problem to small and medium businesses. By the way, only the actual main post there is one I mocked up. The rest of them are taken off LinkedIn, Twitter, various places. So they are genuine claims. So cyber attacks happen every day, but large corporations are not the only target. More than 70% of attacks are targeted at small to mid-sized businesses. 70% small and mid-sized businesses. 70%, according to the National Cybersecurity Alliance, we've got a source this time, it's great, small businesses. Small businesses, 70%. And more than 70% of compromised small businesses go out of business. For anyone wondering, by the way, the statistic is about 90% of small businesses go out of business in the first year of operation. So that happens a lot. So what's missing from all of this? Well, sources. Said lies. Right. When you see these posts, when you see this marketing, the thing that's almost always missing is a source. Now, when there is a source, can you trust it? Most people will say, oh, there's a source, that's great, I've done my due diligence, I've checked. There was one about the National Cybersecurity Alliance saying 70% of small businesses. The National Security Alliance have this statement. An increase in the sharing and usage of this third-party 2011 statistic. 60% of businesses close within 6 months of a cyber attack. That is the only place they address anything even remotely like the claims made. Turns out it was in a report that they published and then disavowed because they'd taken it from a third party and decided it wasn't reliable. It was not generated from their research. It wasn't 70%, it was 60%, and it was about businesses closing, not where the attacks are aimed. You might be able to tell I get irritated about things I probably shouldn't. Who likes maths? Yeah, we've got some saying yes. So, interaction time. Who knows how big a small to medium business can be? Up to 250 employees. Brilliant. So, large businesses are over 250 employees. Who knows how many small to medium businesses there are in the UK?
Many. A lot. Last statistic. 70%.
5.5 million. Who knows how many large businesses are in the UK?
Not many.
Less. 2,000?
It is more than 2,000.
200k?
No, 36,000, or 37 if you round up. Told you, lies. Brilliant. We've got those numbers now. So we've got 5.5 million small to medium businesses, including micros. I mean, 72% of UK businesses don't have any employees. Possibly because they're money laundering shell companies, but that's a different issue. I've got another talk on that. 8,000 large businesses. 36,000 small to medium or medium businesses. 99.86% of UK businesses, remember the precision there because that gets pointed out later as a way to spot false numbers. So over 99% are small to medium. 0.14% are large enterprises. What does this mean? Well, how many attacks were there? And attacks can mean anything. Phishing emails are included in attacks, whether or not they succeed. So how many attacks do you think there were in, let's say, 2024 to date?
Millions.
7.8 million. Remember, we are including phishing emails. We're including WhatsApp messages. We're including online graffiti. Everything counts as an attack these days. Usually sophisticated if it makes it to the press. So, 30% of that is 2.3 million. So 2.3 million attacks against 8,000 companies. 70% is 5.5 million. So 5.5 million attacks against 5.5 million SMEs. So statistically, if you're an SME, you're doing pretty well. You've got one attack a year to worry about. Meanwhile, if you're a large enterprise, you've got a different problem. That statistic is worse than useless because it completely misleads on the scale of the problem. Now, I'm not saying small and medium businesses don't need to worry about security. They do. Everyone does to a point. I am saying this is a load of unethical marketers or ignorant marketers who've picked up on a statistic and gone, that will help us sell our silver bullet to people who don't have the budget to actually understand what we're doing. Or knowledge. There is a skills gap. It's not at the entry level. So, common statistical mistakes. Here's one. Lack of proportionality. Which yellow segment represents a bigger number?
Depends on the size of the number.
Depends on the creative.
Yeah, it's the smaller one. Really common. You will see charts all the time. Sometimes they'll have labels written really small. I always love that. They at least tried to do it right. 70% of small to medium enterprises, 70% of attacks will affect small to medium enterprises. That's exactly what that problem is. If we'd had the source, if they'd included the actual data, that would completely change the claim. I'm sorry to the salespeople in the room, but marketers lie. Learn maths. Correlation is not causation. Now, for anyone who doesn't know the little symbol there, I do love my formal logic symbols. That is, does not imply. Because it's not that correlation is not equal to causation. That's a mistake people often make. Causation always involves correlation. Correlation does not always imply causation. And much of the time it doesn't, such as when we're talking about the number of breweries in the United States and solar power generated in Peru. Instantly remember that URL, it's brilliant. It has thousands of these, and they've even added ChatGPT to explain why each one is a valid correlation. So you have spurious correlations, and for added fun, AI hallucinations to explain them. This is a gift for misinformation. Anyone angry about misinformation, this is really the site you want to have on hand. Who here did GCSE or A-level statistics? Anyone remember the big bag of marbles with black and white marbles in? Yeah. How many do you have to draw out to make a useful guess about what proportion of marbles are in there? There is. So, unrepresentative samples. One of the most popular things for companies to do in their marketing is say, we did a customer survey and 80% of our customers are satisfied with what we did. Brilliant. What about everyone who's no longer a customer? I really want to know how many people aren't your customers anymore, because if you've got 20% unhappy customers and they're just too tied in to leave, I question how good your product is or your service. Another one, the Office of National Statistics, they put a lot of work into representative surveys. However, saying that, they will survey a few thousand businesses each year to get a representative sample of the entire UK business landscape. There's a massive margin for error in that, especially when you consider cybersecurity companies. There are 55,000 estimated cybersecurity professionals in the UK. Now, 5.5 million businesses, 6 million if we're including the large ones and everything else, 55,000 professionals. If you go to the large enterprise, every single one of them has at least one cybersecurity professional, at least someone who's labelled that. Whether they are or not is a different question. The smaller businesses don't. Which means that if a company, which is, say, a cybersecurity consultancy, makes it into that sample, and it's a small or micro one, and this has happened, I can vouch for it, they sent me a survey and offered a fine if I didn't do it, then you've just skewed that completely. Because you're now suddenly saying, yeah, 1 in 1,000 of these small businesses we're surveying has, I'd say, reasonable cybersecurity knowledge. Now, from my own experience, I've only spoken to dozens. It's not that they've not got concern. It's not that they're not worried about it. It's that they have absolutely no way to address the problem. So when you start throwing stats at them like 70% of attacks are targeted at you, yes, you, fear, uncertainty, doubt, the way that we sell, worse, much, much worse. And where I think the problem gets really bad, learned helplessness. We are saying, this is too big. If you don't buy our £50,000 solution, then you're doomed, like all small businesses. Well, yeah, but I run a little bakery out of my home kitchen. I don't have 50,000 to spend on an IT solution. I'm really worried about cybersecurity threats because everyone says this is the big threat, but I can't do anything about it. I can't afford the big solutions. So all I can do is sit there with constant anxiety that I'm going to lose my livelihood and my business. Now, in fairness, only 62% of the UK working population work in those small businesses. So 38% are in the large enterprises and don't have to worry about it. They have a security department for that. The disservice that we are doing with the way that we do marketing to those small businesses, to individuals, to small family businesses, small group businesses, by saying, you must invest this much, you must do this much, you must understand everything, is horrendous. This is part of why we have all of the problems around fraud in the UK. Largest crime, 40% of crime is fraud. The most common theft you will get is through fraud, and over 70% of that is online fraud in some way. That doesn't include by phone, that doesn't include by text message. Over 70% is online. And then we go to people, oh yeah, but it was obviously fraud. How did you fall for it? You're really stupid. You fell for it. People who have been caught by fraud are scared to talk about it because of the condemnation, because of the way that we play with statistics, and because of the way that we do our messaging around dealing with it. Yeah, this isn't just about statistics, by the way. It's a whole messaging piece. It includes lies. But we really need to fix this as an industry. Cherry-picking data. When you really can't get the numbers from your customer survey to go the way you want, just, tighten it up a little. Say, well, we're picking our biggest customers. Oh, we're only picking our most satisfied customers because they responded soonest. We set the cut-off at 30 days originally, now we're cutting it down to 15, and we're sending all of those a gift basket. Absence of evidence. If we do not have data to prove something, it does not prove it doesn't exist. Again, going back to fraud, there's a huge issue. So the estimate is that it's 40% of crime in the UK. I think it's gone up to 50 now, so there's one of those lies. There's another estimate that it is massively underreported. So about 1 in 10 cases are assumed to not be reported. Now, how do we know that? Well, they've done surveys, and people have said, yeah, I was affected by fraud but didn't bother reporting it because Action Fraud were found unfit for purpose nearly a decade ago and they've not been fixed yet. But people who don't want to feel, oh, I was stupid, oh, I was caught, because that's the message they've been sold, aren't going to suddenly answer, oh, yes, on that anonymous survey. So it's assumed to be massively underreported. We have some evidence that says it is. But anyone saying 9 out of 10 cases aren't reported, we do not have the data to back up that claim. We suspect it's a huge problem. That's a useful thing to do. To say 9 out of 10 cases are not reported, that is far too conclusive. We do not have the research, we do not have the data. And that will apply to so many things. That statistic, 70% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months of a cyber attack. Well, yeah, 70% of small businesses go out of business within 6 months. I mean, it's hardly surprising. Going back to those nice formal logic symbols, that one is therefore, one of my favourites. It looks really cool. Bit predator, but never, ever trust marketing research. If a company sent you a useful white paper drawing all sorts of conclusions, the response should be, what are your sources? What was your methodology? What was your sample size? If you can't tell me all of this, then it's not just going in the bin. I'm going to send it to James, who will rip it apart and post it on LinkedIn with a very angry rant about how you got everything wrong, because he gets unreasonably fixated on these things. Those are just a few of the statistical mistakes you will find. There's another one that often comes up. Spotting fake numbers. When you really can't be bothered to manipulate your research or cherry pick or just draw the wrong conclusions, when you really can't be bothered, you can just make up a number. Usefully, humans are really, really bad at random numbers. And I do mean really bad. Now, when you see people quoting statistics on LinkedIn or making up statistics on LinkedIn, there's a few things that you can watch for. We don't like 0. Psychologically, it seems that we do not feel 0 is a real number. So if we're inventing a number out of nowhere, you're less likely to see a 0 in it than you would otherwise. Being too precise, 99.78. Precision, it's more real. It's more accurate because we've included more numbers. Anyone who actually wants to do a statistic, they just round that up to 98%. Nearly 100%, over 90%, over 95%. When it's a real number, we get incredibly casual about it. When it's a fake number, boy, do we love our digits. There was a certain post by someone who I will not name, DNS. Some of you got that. Which said there were a certain number of vulnerable DNS servers in the world. And it was something like 2,471,972. That was what inspired this particular bit on the spotting fake numbers. They went over precise. Anyone here know how many DNS servers there are in the world? Yeah, neither do I. No one does. No one cares. Clusters. We repeat things, and this is really weird when you go on to the next one. So once we've put a sequence of numbers in one of our massively over-precise sequences to prove people it's real, we're not good at varying it. So you will find the same sequence of 2 or 3 numbers used multiple times in a made-up number. Really, really often. Oddly, it's quite rare in genuine natural numbers. And by natural, I don't mean we're talking E, I, pi, and so on. I'm talking about statistically generated numbers, ones that come from real research. It's quite rare to have repeated sequences like this. But doubles, triples even, are actually quite common in genuinely researched numbers. Psychologically, though, we feel, oh, that's not random enough. So I won't have the doubles together. I'll space them out a bit. This, by the way, is great if anyone here does want to make up random numbers. I'm telling you exactly what to do to make it convincing. Don't do it. So doubles, triples, they are quite common in nature, in actual research. They are very rare in numbers that people have just invented wholesale. My favourite, Benford's Law. This is about the first number of any number. So about 30% of the time, any number derived from research will be led with a 1. Less than 5%, it will be led with a 9. It will never be led with a 0, but that's not useful. But when you look at these numbers, again, we tend to, psychologically, when we're generating them, lead them with something significant or important to us. 7s, 9s, 4s, 3s, 5s, various different ones. The way that we come up with randomly convincing numbers is very different to the way that reality does. Now, all of these are just ways to spot made-up numbers. And it doesn't mean that if it doesn't match any of these rules, someone didn't just invent it. Then you go back to the source and you start digging through and say, where did it really come from? How was your research actually done? I've yet to see a marketing research report which includes their methodology. Ever. Has anyone here come across a vendor white paper which includes the actual method they used to generate those conclusions? Genuinely interested. Has anyone?
90% of the time I do.
70% of statistics are made up on the spot. Not including that one. I heard that from someone else. There you go. You've got a source. It's true.
They're never going to do it. It's not favourable for them to do.
Yeah. They've got an agenda.
Yeah.
They've got an agenda. And yes, it makes sense that they have an agenda. But again, we're not selling chocolate or something like that, where, yes, it has an impact on people's lives, but all we're saying is, oh, we're preferred to this other brand, or we're better, or we're more ethical. None of them are ethical. We are doing marketing. We are selling to people where this makes a real difference to people's lives and their companies. The majority of those people are small to medium, despite the fact I'm willing to bet most people here work for large enterprises. Anyone here work for, or who here works for a company under 50 employees?
The specific side of the room.
Now, fortunately, we know the statistical likelihood of that. So it should be about 99% of you who work for small to mediums under 50. Are you about to be awkward at me?
Have you thought about the statistical variation of the people in the room?
I'm not going into the DEI piece and that. I'm not qualified to talk about that. And other people are. Yes, we have a problem in this industry around it. No, I don't know the solution. Where was I? Thrown me off completely now. Right. So we are in an industry that makes a real difference to people. In that, when we get it wrong, we scare people a lot. We also use technobabble a lot, which is kind of like saying a wizard did it and ran away. So that's brilliant for the average person because I don't even understand why I should be scared, but I'm terrified. You know, we have world-ending disaster scenarios that get talked up on TV a lot. Yes, I'm sorry about the CrowdStrike thing. I did my best to be reasonable and moderate around it, and then other people took the quotes. But we really need to do better, not just at communicating ourselves, but at calling out these unethical practices. Abuse of statistics, yes, because that's a pet peeve, but also outright lies, nonsense threats, and I completely understand why people don't want to call it out. I have had a lawsuit threatened against me for calling it out. That was expensive and I had insurance. Again, that's a whole other talk, but for anyone who was there or wasn't, get professional indemnity and get personal injury insurance. One of those covers you in your profession against people trying to sue you for defamation. The other one covers you in personal circumstances against people trying to sue you for defamation. This will change the costs of a defamation lawsuit against you from about £3,000 to £5,000 to send a letter and make it go away to maybe about 500. You want this insurance if you're going to call people out, because the people who do this stuff get litigious really quickly. Right, I hate to do the any questions thing, and I do have a bit more, but any questions?
How many out of 10 dentists approve this message?
Employed by me or in general? If we're talking about the ones employed by me, then it's a statistically significant number, which is currently undefined because that's a division by 0.
How do you see AI feeding into these fake or false? Because AI is renowned for making statistics up from other sources.
Were you in Slovenia last year? I did a talk there about the dangers of delusional AI. I see AI as a huge problem. I've already seen security consultants generating reports for customers using AI and not properly checking them. Now, these are people who are meant to know what they're doing. You let marketers get their hands on that, and it's going to get bad really fast. So I see AI making it much, much easier for these lies to come out and these lies to spread. Everyone know the lawsuit incident in the US? One of my favourite examples. Lawyer goes to court and presents his brief, presents his case to the judge, and the judge looks at it and says, this precedent doesn't exist. The lawyer goes, oh, I used ChatGPT to generate it. Now, I want to be completely fair to him. At no point had anyone explained to him what an AI hallucination is. I teach cybersecurity on some boot camps. I have had students come back to me to argue against things that I know. Now, anyone associated with those boot camps will know that one of my favourite sayings is there are no right answers, only ones that are less wrong. There are definitely wrong answers, and they came from AI. And if you are using ChatGPT to argue against someone with, I hate to do this because it's appealed to authority, but with over 20 years experience, then something's gone wrong. They're language models, not information models. So I see it making it much, much worse because I've seen the lack of restraint among people who should know better. And for people who are just told, this will tell the truth and answer your problems for you, that's going to be horrendous.
Do you have, like, if people are putting stuff that's incorrect in marketing, do you not go to like an advertising?
Standards agency?
Yeah.
No.
You, theoretically, yes. Well, it's more complex because often people are doing this in social media posts and they're doing it in sort of their personal capacity, even if they're putting it under a company. If it's not paid advertising, the Advertising Standards Agency don't really get much to do with it. There are some exceptions around health claims and similar. Cybersecurity claims there aren't. And on top of that, if you're going to the Advertising Standards Agency, they need to prove that it's inaccurate, that it's wrong. We do not have the research to do that in most of these cases because we have very little data to go on. So in theory, you can, and if enough people complained, they might do an investigation and someone might get a slap on the wrist. But most likely, because this is what I would do if I was completely unethical and worked in sales, I don't. But I would turn around and say, oh, well, we had this survey. 9 out of 10 dentists agree. Because I've got the data to back that up. That means it's a true claim. Now, if they're completely inventing it out of nowhere, yes, there is something that you could do. But even then, there's a reason that certain people, DNS, are still so active and prolific at spreading this misinformation or disinformation because it's deliberate.
So you talked about reports needing methodology and never including them, which is absolutely true. But what other things should people say if there was a marketer in the room, God forbid? What should we actually be looking for in those papers to lend themselves to legitimacy? What should we be looking for?
Sources. If they're not including a source, there's a reason why. Methodology and independent research that comes to the same conclusion. Now, the problem is, a lot of the time we will find one company does a research report and everyone else quotes it. Like the number of companies there saying 70% of small businesses. Well, it's reliable because I saw it somewhere else. And they saw it somewhere else. And they saw it somewhere else. I've got another talk based on something similar, which is more about the whole web of trust thing. We tend to trust people that we like, and that means we will trust the numbers that they give us. And it's not that people spreading these numbers are necessarily bad, with some exceptions. It's that they're not thinking it through. They're not considering it carefully. So, yeah, the answer is it's really difficult.
There's something else similar. You might have heard the site a lot about diversity, that women will only apply for a job if they have only got 7% of skills. And that's been proven that source is completely made up. The report that was supposed to have said it was meant to have been an extension. It didn't say that. It's so easy, and that gets calculated so many times. Women will only apply if they've got 7% skills, men will apply if they've got 90. No, the other way around. But, yeah. You see it so well.
Yeah.
That's everywhere. And that's touted as a really...
And it's completely made up.
Yeah.
You know, the cost of cybercrime worldwide is in the trillions. What's the source for that number? Anyone?
My bank account?
James.
That's the profit from.
It's a sales marketing type company that made it up, isn't it? It's the same sort of, it's never changed in the last 15 years.
Oh, it's gone up a few times. They, add a few digits each year. I remember 10 years ago it was in the billions.
Is it CSO? You know what it stands for?
Probably. No, they quote other people's. They don't do research themselves.
They just have the inflation each year, that's it.
That's it, yeah.
Cost of living.
So just to tie to that, somebody who works with marketers, sales, fortunately, I can attest that even if there is a source, it's skewed. So you can go in and check the source, it all makes sense, but it's skewed. Like a common example is hospitals are the most dangerous public spaces.
Yeah.
A lot of people die there.
It's shocking, isn't it?
It makes sense, but if you give it to a marketer, so don't trust market research, even with sources.
That's statistics in general.
Question statistics. I mean, importantly, remember there's context. There's proportions to be considered. Now, sadly, as humans, we're also really bad at big numbers. So the moment it hits the millions, it stops making sense. Even the thousands are a struggle. 1,000 and a million and a billion and a trillion, they're roughly the same thing, right? I know mathematically everyone here is going to say, no, that's ridiculous. Psychologically, all of us, if we just see that, we're going to go, oh yeah, big number. It's just big. It's many. Can't remember who said many, but yeah.
Why did you say that numbers obviously in the future sources, the bigger the numbers and the wider the context, less reliable they are. At some point, you have to go for numbers. So, senior management, for example, would be looking at some numbers, make a decision. And people will be looking to go out and get those numbers. So, if I'm sitting in a company, I can't go out and do the research, I'll be running some numbers. So what's the prognosis? What are we saying? Don't do those numbers? Or are we saying that take it with pinch of salt but put several caveats around it?
Make your best effort to make sure those numbers are reliable and include the caveats. I mean, I ran a vulnerability scanning program for a national infrastructure company for about 2 years. And in the first 2 days after we finally got the tooling set up, it was brilliant. We went from over 250,000 vulnerabilities detected to under 100,000 in a few days. Yeah. That would have been a great number to report to senior management and told them, yes, give this guy a raise. Lacked context. I could have just taken it and reported it. I looked at it, and it was because there were 3 vulnerabilities that we had marked down as false positives with good reason. So it's do your due diligence, be transparent, be ethical, do your best. And be aware you can fool yourself. You're the easiest person to lie to. Not for me to lie to, but for you to lie to. This is my get in touch. You can go there because it's obligatory now. I did a whole book thing, but mostly if you want to get in touch, do. Any last questions? Oh, that was a phone, not a hand. Right. Well, in that case, really, really important takeaway here. If someone is using numbers to make a point, this includes me, then ask questions about it. They're using it for an agenda. Doesn't matter who they are. Think tanks in America funded by certain companies lobby against minimum wage because it will cause inflation and cost of living increases. Now, those companies shockingly employ a huge number of people at minimum wage. There's always an agenda. There's always something behind it. Even if someone's agenda is benign, be aware that that may skew things. Ask about motivations. Ask about methods. Ask about what they're selling or what they're lobbying for. If someone's using numbers to try and make a point, including me, ask questions. Thank you.